It was a season of starts and unfortunate stops and what amounted to a lost year for Ozzie Albies. So what went right when he was on the field? What went wrong? And what's next? You're watching BPTV. Cory McCartney and Grant McAuley with you as always as we continue our player review/previews. And Grant playing a mere 64 games and missing the postseason with a broken foot and then a fractured pinky. 2022 was a season Ozzie Albies would probably like to forget.
I think that you could definitely file it under that. And when you go into the expectations that you had, we talked about Ronald Acuna Jr. already, but for Ozzie Albies, I think he was kind of dealing from the deck that was dealt to, or the hand that was dealt to Ronald Acuna Jr., same deck, different year in terms of losing half of a season. And that, unfortunately, for Ozzie involved not one, but two separate injuries, a freak injury and breaking the foot, another freak injury in the second game back from a long stint on the injured list by breaking the pinky on a slide. So, you want to forget about all of that. And then you kind of look at the overall numbers. He just really wasn't able to get himself going in that first half at all. And then you thought, all right, well, that's fine because Ozzie Albies is going to come back for that stretch drive and play a big role in Atlanta's postseason hopes. That just flat out didn't happen. So I think 2023 is a year in which Ozzie Albies is going to be, yes, that's right, in the best shape of his life. And he's going to be out there trying to get things back to normal, which is being one of the best second basemen in baseball.
I love it. So let's look at what did go right when he was in the field. He was limited to a mere 269 plate appearances, so there wasn't a lot of positives at the plate as Albies' expected stats were all at career lows, so were the percentile ranks and contact numbers. And I know it feels like this is the wrong section, but amid those issues at the plate, Albies was still his dynamic self at second base. Even with that limited time in the field, he was still 85th percentile and outs above average with 4, and that was his best since 2018.
Yeah, and that's something that is no small thing when you feel like this is a player that gives you that all-around great package of being able to, yes, make a difference at the plate, on the bases, and, of course, in the field. I think that he's a guy that is going to continue to be in consideration for Gold Glove awards or Fielding Bible awards. I just feel like Ozzie, he checks all the boxes for what you do want, but it seems like putting it all together at times can be a little bit challenging because he gets a little swing happy, a little pull happy from the left side. His numbers from the right side are typically pretty good, but 2022, it just didn't seem like much was going right at the plate for him, save a couple of home run binges that he went on. But still, in basically less than half a season's worth of games, was still at least a useful player, but it just was a far cry from what he'd been in seasons prior. Because if you look at once he became a full-time player in 2018, and I did this for Ronald, I'll do it for Ozzie because they're inextricably linked, but you go 2018 through 2021 on the per 162, and you got a guy that hits 272, averages nearly 30 home runs, 90 RBIs, 100 runs scored, steals 17, nearly 20 bases, and is a 4+ WAR player average per 162. And that, I think, is what the Braves were feeling was going to be more of what they were in line for. A guy that averages about 75 extra base hits per full season. That happened as recently as 2021. So it's just, this was a far cry from the player that we expected to see, but hopefully he's going to be able to pull the nose up and in his age 26 season, get himself back on track.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to pinpoint what didn't go well in a year in which he was limited with time on the field and obviously didn't come with the expected results of the plate when he was in the field. Albies' slash line was a career low at every step of the way, 247, 294, 409. He had a below average weighted run graded plus for the first time at 93. And as you can understand, for a guy who was scuffling to get things on track, he really pressed. He was swinging out of the zone at a career high rate. And subsequently, he saw the fewest pitches of his career in the zone. Meanwhile, the barrel rate, the hard hit rate, all those numbers were down as well. You can almost close your eyes, throw a dart, and find something that didn't go well for Albies in 2022.
Well, it may have felt like that he was closing his eyes and the pitchers were just throwing darts, and that was kind of how his season was going at the plate, particularly from the left side at times. And you mentioned, and that was what I was going to go to, was as you looked inside his StatCast page, he was not making the kind of consistent hard contact that you would think that he would be making. And in fact, that really bared out in all of his other stats that it just wasn't the kind of year that you would have expected from him. And, despite the 8 home runs in a shortened season for him, that just really wasn't enough to kind of take the edge off of a lot of shortcomings in a lot of other statistical categories, particularly from the plate. I know a lot of people have kind of been hard on Ozzie being a switch hitter because, he's so good from the right side. Why didn't he just hit from the right side all the time? I don't foresee that being anything the Braves are going to think about doing. They're certainly not going to hit the panic switch after one injury-riddled year, but it just goes to show you that, this is a guy that, the overall dynamics of his game, he can affect the game in different ways and in different ways at the plate. It just didn't happen in 2022 for whatever the reason was. Impressing and seeing the fewest pitches of your career, I would put that pretty high on the list of how you can have a lowered barrel rate, your exit velocities can drop because pitchers, they realize you don't have any answers. And so they don't really have to even ask you the same questions they normally would.
So like Albies is probably doing himself, we're going to turn the page on 2023. And there's obviously nothing potentially lingering from those injuries. So there's no reason to not expect Albies to be back to his old self. And the first projections or forecasting as much Steamer looks at him having a 3.1 F4 with 20 homers, 109 weighted run created plus, a 759 OPS, numbers that are all in line with what we've come to expect from Albies. Look, Vaughn Grissom had his moments. So did Orlando Arcia, but the Braves were 22nd in second base production after Albies broke his foot, along with Ronald Acuna Jr. being back to 100%. I don't know that there's a bigger boon to this team than having Ozzie Albies back at his normal production.
Yeah, and these are two things. And again, you talk about Ozzie, Ronald usually comes up and vice versa. They typically are always listed one after the other. But when you do think about the impact that the 2023 club could get from a couple of healthy returns, and I know, again, Ronald was out there way more than Ozzie was, but I do feel like he had rehabbed that foot. He was ready to come back. He was back. And then that finger injury happened. So if anything, at least he was able to test out that foot, get into the winter and move himself through and hopefully have a normal progression. But yeah, if he's back to being the guy that can hit 265 to 275 with 25 plus homers, 65 to 70 extra base hits, and as you illustrated earlier, you have an uptick in what he's able to do outs above average in the field and some of the other things he does for you defensively, this is back to being one of the Braves' best players. And he brought up the guys that were trying to, play in his stead and doing an admirable job at times. The Braves are simply a better baseball team when Ozzie Albies is out there on a regular basis. It changes the dynamics, I think, in the clubhouse, the overall chemistry in that dugout, and of course, it bears out on the field as well. So getting a healthy Ozzie Albies back, it's not like making a trade at the deadline, but it is like making your club a lot better because you quite simply are back to where you expect to be. And I think that's where he's going to be in 2023.
Well, the offseason trucks along, and so do we here on BPTV. So be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell a friend to help this thing grow. And don't forget, you can listen to us on From the Diamond, available wherever you find your podcast. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.